It is time for the Showdown Lowdown.
Showdown Lowdown.
And this is where we do our Seattle sports news and updates for the week. This last week had a lot of great things that happened in Seattle sports, but there is one thing that we really have to highlight this week. And we're going to take a lot of time here in the Showdown Lowdown talking about those Seattle Mariners ending the playoff drought that they had for 21 years.
That's a long time.
And to talk about this, we are joined by one of our dear friends, former UW quarterback, Jaden Sheffey. Hey, Jaden, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. So Jaden is a huge Seattle Mariners fan. We crossed paths on Twitter. He reached out, we connected, we became pretty solid friends. Anytime anything Seattle Mariners happens, we're texting each other about what's going on in the games, frustrations, excitement, moments where there's awesome hits or home runs. Maybe Marco Gonzalez gave up a home run and Jaden has some feelings about that.
Could be a thing.
It's his best friend. He loves Marco Gonzalez. Right, Jaden?
Of course.
So before we kind of dive into how the Mariners got to this point and, clinched a spot in the playoffs, we want to show just the moment that got them there.
Yeah.
And that was Cal Raleigh's walk-off home run in the 9th inning. The count was 3-2. So let's just go ahead and watch that moment live right now.
Big Cal. The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. The drought is over. Cal Raleigh. Wow. Hey now.
Are you kidding me, Cal Raleigh? He gets a slider and hits it off the windows out there.
Oh, that was just...
Yeah.
What were your feelings, Jaden? In that moment, what were your feelings that were going through your mind, your body?
Well, first, I wish I was there. That was number one.
Yeah.
I think second, I was trying to keep quiet because I was visiting some friends. I was actually in Boise, visiting some friends in Boise, and everyone was asleep because Boise's an hour ahead. So I was trying to keep quiet. So I'm thinking to myself, you know what? We always seem to like chaos ball. I think we're going to walk it off. So I actually tweeted before. I was like, we're going to walk it off here in the 9th. And it's just so funny how it came down to 2 outs, full count, pinch hitter. And it just looked like the place erupted. So I wish I was there for that.
And Cal Raleigh, I mean, that wasn't his first moment where he's done a pinch hit and he came in and hit a home run.
Yeah.
He's been really clutch for the Mariners this season. He's developed really well as a catcher. Offensively, defensively, he's shown up this season for the Mariners. I mean, so we were also out of town. We weren't able to be there for that moment. We were in Whidbey Island. And I know that you and I were texting in the moment of, oh my gosh, this happened. And I'm sitting there. We don't have, at least we didn't think we had Root Sports. So I'm sitting there just waiting for the live feed updates and trying to get the videos to download so I can see what happens. And I watch and I just the tears come and they're happy. They're happy tears, the emotions that you could see. And then you start to envision and you start to feel what would it have felt like to be there to witness that with all those people around you.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And when you start to envision what those emotions are. I mean, I had tears down my face.
She did.
My mascara started running.
That's true.
There were some real things happening for me.
But you looked gorgeous anyway.
Appreciate it. Kate, so what was your experience, Kate? Because you got to see me have my feelings, but what were your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, I mean, so I understand that the longevity of the length of time everyone's had to kind of wait for this to happen, and I think I'm just generally an optimistic person about stuff like this when it gets to this point, and with last season, they were so close. It seemed like they made such a comeback at the end of last season. And so this season, I didn't want to say anything out loud because Mikaela gets mad if I say stuff because she's like, you're going to jinx it or you're going to mess it up or whatever, right? And so But I feel like in my head, like for a while, I've just been thinking like, well, they're gonna make the playoffs. Like they're not gonna not make the playoffs at this point. That wouldn't make any sense. So I think because I just weirdly thought that already when it happened, I was like, yeah, exactly. Like that was totally like, yes.
Like not as surprising to Kate as it.
I think
Sure.
I don't think it was, but I think that's only because I already decided it was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be that game or like a different game, but I just had already figured it was happening, so I wasn't like so blown away. And so seeing Mikaela be so excited about it, and then like Twitter just like went crazy,
Yeah.
and all of that, like so that was pretty cool. And and I went to Mariners games like back in the Kingdom with like my dad and stuff, and so I remember like a long time ago how the Mariners were and everything, but in between some of that stuff, I had like a big span of time here where I didn't really pay any attention to sports whatsoever. So I think for the people who have been like Mariners fans for the whole time, and like and actually followed sports and baseball and stuff, like I can totally understand why it was like so huge.
Such a big deal. Yeah.
And it's been exciting to see how pumped up people are because it is a really big deal. And even if you aren't like a lifelong Mariners fan, or even if you're not much of a baseball fan, even now, like I think people can appreciate how big of an occasion this is. That's cool to me,
Oh, for sure. I think another thing too was, so I had went to a ton of games with my friends over the season. One, Walterius Jones, who I do the YSM podcast with,
Yeah.
and my cousin Julian. My cousin Julian and I, we went to the Yankees game when it went to 13 innings, and Luis Torrens had the walk-off.
Yep.
So I went to that game, and then obviously there was all these like great moments throughout the season up till the Braves series when Julio and Suarez hit back-to-back home runs for the walk-off win. And after that game, I was like, it can't get any more exciting than this. Like, there's just no way. Like, you can't top both those games.
No.
And Cal's definitely did. So to see all those three games end like that was pretty wild.
Well, and that hit, Cal's hit, I mean, like, I was watching we're watching the replay of it on like the tiny like phone screen versus like a big TV or something. And I'm like trying to watch where that ball goes, and I have no idea. I'm like, what? And I lose it in the tiny screen. And so I'm like, I'm hoping it goes, clear and everything. And then it did, but I was like, I have no idea where that ball is. So I don't know. Like, I'm assuming everybody else there knows because they're all excited. So, but yeah, it's a different feeling. And I'm sure the people that were there in person, like, I'm sure that was just,
oh my gosh.
And like just louder than anything I can imagine, probably.
It's just nice to see the stadium like that with that environment. Because, I mean, over the years, we're so used to empty seats, especially towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
So people actually, had a reason to come, and it was excited to see everyone excited. The whole city, for that matter.
How do you think that, how the season ended last year, right? So if we're talking about now, like, how did we get here? Mm-hmm. How did this Mariners team end the drought? How did they make it to the playoffs after 21 years? So how did we get here? The end of last season felt different. Mm-hmm. It felt like the winds were changing. I'm like, is Mary Poppins going to show up and magic's going to happen? The winds were changing.
Yeah.
End of the season happened, and they had sold out crowds those last few games.
Yep.
It was devastating when they didn't clinch that wild card spot.
Yeah.
But the start of the season, Mitch Haniger writes that letter to the fans. Mm-hmm. And it felt the energy and people showing up and the fans showing up and the sold out crowds. How much do you think that played a role in how the season went for the Mariners?
Yeah, I think it was big because at the end of last year, I mean, we finished with 90 wins, but that very last game, that last homestand, obviously Kyle Seager retired. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of gave like the players a different perspective. Losing a guy like that has a big presence in the locker room or the clubhouse, if you will. I think definitely like woke up a few of the players. You see JP stepped into a big leadership role this year, and him and Haniger have been there the longest. So there was definitely, as you said, like the winds kind of changing within the team. And then I think it was on the front office to make some big moves in free agency. I mean, they went out and got Adam Frazier. They went out and got all the players from the Reds. You know, we got
Everybody.
Winker, literally, but we got Winker, Suarez. So they made some big moves to add some more bats to the lineup. And then obviously with Julio, I mean, where do we start there? He's been the energy is just way different when Julio's out there. So there's been a lot of additions to the team, and I think it's obviously paid off, as we can see.
Yeah, I mean, Robbie Ray was that
Robbie Ray too. Yeah,
acquisition, right? That was right before the lockout too.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So that was right before the lockout. They got Castillo in the midseason.
Yeah, Santana was big for veteran presence.
Santana, who Julio really like connected with. So they went and they made these moves and these acquisitions, and they've also locked in some of these players long term this season, huge contract extensions for some of these players, which is great because this is a playoff caliber team. They have locked in the playoffs.
Yeah, totally.
So, with that being said, too, let's talk about Julio Rodriguez a little bit. He comes in, and seeing them say, like, you're starting on this roster, you have a spot at the beginning of the season. We all noticed, even just in the last few games when he wasn't with us on the team, he was on that 10-day IL stint.
Yeah.
What does Julio's generational talent and his energy that he brings to the game, how much of a difference do you think in terms of wins and losses does Julio make? Does this team without Julio Rodriguez make the playoffs this season?
I don't think so. Because, you know, behind Suarez, I think he's second in RBIs for our team. I think him and France are pretty close. But he just adds such a big presence to that lineup. And obviously, you know, we see the energy, the excitement that he brings to the team. And several players have talked about it throughout the season in interviews about just what Julio does for the program. So I think that's been a huge addition to this ball club. I think the real game I experienced, like, okay, Julio's for real, was the Grand Slam against the Rangers. That's when I was like, okay, this guy's legit. Because obviously the beginning of the season, when we started out, I believe we started out in Minnesota and then went to the White Sox. Like, he was kind of struggling to hit. I think he only had one hit in like 5 or so games.
Yeah.
I remember on Twitter, everyone was like, oh, this guy's not ready. I'm like, hold on. He's only 21. Like, he just started. And obviously we all understand the backstory, you know, his family coming up for the game, that whole story behind it. Like, that's a huge adjustment. So to see it go from that to where it is now, him signing that huge extension and playoffs for the first time in 21 years, the story couldn't have been written better.
It's great. It's a good one. I agree. I love when you see him, like, it's harder maybe when you're like at the stadium because, you know, the players are like farther away from you. But like when you're watching it on TV, at least, and they can get all the good camera angles, I just love, you just see the joy in his face. Like, he just exudes that this is like the thing he loves to do, right?
Yeah.
So like, since he loves to do it so much and you can just feel it, it's like you're bought in. You're like, yes, let's, you know, and he's magnetic in that way, I think, especially for the team. And, you know, I'm sure having all the fans there makes like a huge difference and everything. And his personality and his energy, I think, is just going to continue to draw people in because you want to be there to like experience that.
Yeah.
What I think.
Yeah,
well,
for sure.
I feel like he is so much of a people person. So like with the fans, he's super charismatic and he's very engaged with the fan base, and he's embracing Seattle as his city. And at a time, and this is a little nod to what's happening in Seattle sports in general, right when Russell Wilson leaves, he was our Seahawks franchise quarterback. He was the face, like, kind of Seattle. In walks Julio, and it's kind of like, wow, you saved the day. You walked in, you're this generational talent. the Mariners haven't made the playoffs for 21 years.
Yeah.
There's a sense of hope that the city of
Yeah.
Seattle needed
Mhm.
when that transition happened, and it happened at the right time.
Mhm.
And it happened at the right time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Now, I kind of want to highlight Eugenio, because in the trade, when we went and got, it was actually a trade, what it felt like when people were talking about this trade happening, oh, we got the all-star player Jesse Winker.
Mm.
And then
Mhm.
they also added in Julio or Eugenio Suarez.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because Jesse Winker, although he had his moments that people really loved his personality,
Mhm.
he didn't quite show up in the way that I think people were anticipating or hoping that he would, specifically with his bat. But the positive vibes that Eugenio brings, it's the
Yeah.
mixture for me of
Good vibes only.
Julio and Eugenio that I really, really love, that they brings a certain kind of energy and leadership to this team.
Yeah.
So can you kind of like speak on what were your initial thoughts when we made that trade? Were you expecting Suarez to be such an impact player for this team over like Jesse Winker, or was it vice versa for you?
Yeah, when I first saw the trade, I was excited because of Winker. I honestly didn't know much about Suarez at the time. My biggest concern was filling in that third base fielding gap that we were losing from Seager. So I was like, I'm not sure about replacing a third baseman. Haven't really heard of this guy much, but at least we got Jesse Winker. You know, we're adding two bats at least, but I knew Winker for sure that we're adding a good bat to the team. So I was like, I felt like from the beginning we had won the trade, and definitely I'm definitely adamant about that now. I believe we really did. But for Winker, I kind of wrote it down, but it was interesting. Last season he had 24 home runs, 71 RBIs in 423 at bats. This year it's a lot different. He's had 456 at bats, only 14 home runs and 53 RBIs. So when you look at the WAR, that's another stat that is in baseball that kind of calculates your impact to the team. It was significantly low for Jesse's capability this season. So a lot of things people have been arguing is that Haggerty's WAR has been a lot higher than his this season. But you know, I think the nice thing about it is he still has one more year in his contract with us. So to give him kind of that bounce back, at least as far as his bat is concerned, to kind of make up for this year. But when you look at the trade as a whole, like we have Suarez too, like we definitely won that one because he's been such a big impact for us with his bat, fielding, slugging. So you kind of have to look at all of those tangibles that come with it.
I mean, and he came with a great hairstyle, so like that was a
Yeah.
like
I
that was
loved
great.
the black and white, the split right down,
Right?
like the
Like the
Cruella
Cruella
de Vil
DeVille
vibe.
look.
Yes, exactly.
Go back to that. I really like that.
Well, I mean, honestly, like from a hair perspective, that's a lot of bleaching to do on hair. That's like pretty. So it's probably pretty damaging. He probably had to take a break, but I was glad he came with that fun hair. I was like, okay, you've got personality. That's what I thought. Like, because I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know what things are gonna be like, but I'm like, okay, at least you seem like a fun guy, you know, and totally seems like a fun guy still. So
Well, and he had like what 50 home runs last season or something ridiculous. Like Suarez came in with a whole lot of home runs, and like
Yeah.
it wasn't really talked about, which was weird to me. I'm like, how did this guy fly under the radar, or he had like that many home runs, and he was like atop the leaderboard like over the last what like 2 years with the home runs, and
Oh yeah, for
of course
sure.
Aaron Judge comes up and he had his 62nd today. So
yeah.
congrats to Aaron Judge on that. But Eugenio was right up there in the last 2 seasons with the number of home runs he's had.
Yeah, that's very true.
So that was, in my opinion, yes, a win. I do have a question for you as like an athlete. When you have a player like Jesse Winker, who you have high expectations for, and like, is it to be like, should grace be given when there's slumps like this for this extended period of time in terms of like such a drastic change in a player's performance?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, as a ball club, they'll definitely talk about, because you have to go back to the numbers, right? We hear the saying, numbers don't lie all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's definitely grace for at least a season. I mean, some athletes just don't have the season they expected. But it's really about the response of it. Because if it happens again next year, then you really have to ask some tougher questions about the performance moving forward. But I think with just this season, especially with the fielding and the at-bats, just hasn't been as strong as his performance in the past. So you chalk it up as a season and move forward and see if he does better next year is what I think.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I like that. So in talking about, again, how the Mariners got here, that 14-game win streak leading into the All-Star break. If we didn't have that 14-game win streak, would we be here in this position?
I really don't think so. Yeah, that was a huge momentum shifter for us, especially before the All-Star break. That was really big time to have that huge win streak, because I think it was very similar to the win streak we had, I want to say 2001. I think they had a similar win streak. So that really just, I think, paid dividends for setting the tone the rest of the season. Because at least in the past with our Mariners teams and lineups and rosters, we tend to get pretty hot before the break, but it's after the break where we kind of tank.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get that vibe this year, which was nice to see.
Yeah.
Well, and the other part of it too is just like that momentum, and then when you win that many games back to back to back, it kind of gives you a little bit of a cushion, you feel like, as you go into the All-Star break. Like if you come back a little bit rusty after a week of not, playing games, that there's a little bit of an extra cushion as long as you were already, well, and let's be honest, they kind of climbed in that 14-game win streak there. And they got themselves in a much better position, even within our own division. Now the Astros felt kind of like impossible to catch this entire season. They did a good job, as much as I really do not like the Astros. I was rooting for them there at the end of this season.
It felt wrong.
It felt so weird, like texting you and saying like, oh God, like I hope the Astros win, like keep me updated. I'm on the road. I don't know what's happening. Like please let us know what's happening with this game. And I never thought I would be like, I hope the Astros win.
Yeah.
I know that felt a little weird, but glad the Orioles lost.
Yes,
I think with that All-Star break, just watching that and watching the home run derby, I think that kind of gave people an extra little boost of energy. Not just fans, but the players too. Like seeing this 21-year-old kid, Julio, first season, just crushing it. Like his first round, I think he had more home runs. Like I forget who he was competing against, but he beat him by like 10 plus.
Yeah.
And so we were all like, whoa. Because, you had the Grand Slam against the Rangers. He came back from his IL and then was still hitting well. Crushed it at the home run derby, almost won. And then you're like, okay, like we actually have a shot. Like this guy's legit.
Yeah, he is legit.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about the national attention that grabbed. So in all the things that are adding up to say this is how the Mariners got there, the national attention that the Mariners have not gotten in the last 21 years, it's all been negative, right? Like they haven't been able to make it back. They haven't been able to make it back. And all of a sudden, 14 games, it was like they won 10 straight. They won 14 straight. And it was starting to gain all this national attention. Julio Rodriguez, this, in the All-Star game, in the home run derby, and look at this kid. And now I feel like the Mariners are getting a level of respect that they haven't gotten in a long time. Not only from the media nationally, Major League Baseball and what's being put out there, but from fans on other teams. The moment we clinched the playoff spot, I put some videos out there and different things out in social media, and some of the responses to those in the comments were like, hey, San Francisco fan here, like you guys deserve it, congrats. Phillies fan here, you deserve it, congrats. You guys have been doing great pulling, it's just like,
yeah, for sure.
All these different teams and these fans from other teams have a respect. They know, I can only imagine that as fans from other fan bases are just like, that would suck to be in that position, and I'm happy for them. Which is a weird, like, it's just like, that's sad, but it's, we're getting attention.
Just bring that, I don't know, I guess not really underdog at this point per se, but just in terms of like how long it's been, like just bring that underdog energy and like just everybody else just bandwagon around, like it's fine.
Yeah.
Just pull them all up, we'll take you, like it's okay. And just
totally.
just celebrate it well, like for what we've got, for while we've got it. I mean, that's what I think. I'm being positive about the whole situation, but I'm not saying allowed. So that's where we're at.
I like that you use the word underdog because Jaden, I'm going to ask you a question here. Let's look forward to the playoffs. Okay.
Yep.
That starts the end of this week. You had mentioned on Twitter. Can you share for the listeners who you think we're going to be playing based off of the results of just this last game?
Yeah. So with the win today, because obviously the Mariners are in a doubleheader today, playing Detroit, and I believe the Rays. Can't remember. I think they were playing the Red Sox today. The Red Sox ended up winning. So with that, it looks like, since I believe now we're 2 or 2.5 games ahead of the Rays for second place. So with that being said, there's only 2 games left in the regular season for most teams, I believe for everyone. So that means we'll probably be heading to Toronto. Toronto didn't play today. They were supposed to play the Orioles, but that game got postponed. So that it's kind of set in stone at this point that we're going to Toronto, and then the Rays will go to Cleveland, with New York Yankees and Houston having the first round buys in the AL. So that's what it's looking like right now.
How do you feel about that first matchup for the Mariners? Do you think that we're the underdogs in that situation?
I would say yes, because this, like we all know, this is our first time here in 2 decades. So I think from a fan perspective, we all have to take a step back and be thankful that we're in this position because it's been so long. But that doesn't mean obviously settle for a first round exit or expect that, because that's not what you want. But Toronto's a good team. I was telling my friends, they're experienced. They got great players that can hit the ball well. Their fielding's been good. Their pitching's been good towards the second half of the season. So it's going to be a test for sure. And you guys know about the Toronto fans. So they show out for their games. So it'll be definitely a hostile environment. The only thing I did not want to have happen was, I believe we're going to win the first round of the wild card. But unfortunately, that means we're headed to Houston after, which is what I didn't really want to have happen. But that's okay.
That's a good point.
You know who took a series over the Astros?
Oh, wait. Is that
the Athletics?
The Athletics.
Athletics can do it. Granted, I don't know what the situation was with the Astros. They have injuries. Were they not playing their best guys? Who knows? Were they resting them at that point? But on any given day, anything can happen. But yes, it's one hell of a matchup if they have to go up against the Astros. But you know what? Go out there if you're the underdog. I guess one of my main concerns is why are they so hot and cold offensively? What happens to our offense and our hitting that makes them score 10, 11, 12 runs in one game, and then the next game they can barely get a hit?
Yeah. I think one thing that I'm looking at as a positive is this team actually does really well on the road. So I'm pretty happy about that, because we've seen them do really well and win a lot of big series. For example, the Yankees, the Mets, those were some big series where we were on the road. We kind of had backs against the wall. With the Mets and Yankees, both teams had won the first games of the series, and then we won the next 2. So I kind of can see that happening again with Toronto. But yeah, the bats have got to be consistent. As you guys know, I've been doing the week, or I guess series summaries for the past probably say 2 months now.
Yeah.
And those have been fun to do, just to kind of write up what I think is going to happen and see where the game's going to go. They've been pretty spot on for the most part, I would say. But
I've been impressed when you share that, and you put that out there, and then you check back in with it. I like that you always go back and you follow up to say how on was I with what I had predicted or what I said needed to happen. And honestly, I've been very impressed.
Oh, thank you. That's been fun to do.
Yeah. And I like that we've checked in too. We were like, hey, who do you think are the players to watch? And I'm sitting there and I'm I'm curious who he thinks I think I should am I going to say the thing that he's thinking? How am I? And so when we're on the same wavelength, I'm like, okay, I feel somewhat smart, because I know like I watch the games and I stay on top of it. We
Yeah.
text about the Mariners often, but I feel like you really know on a deeper level than I do, which is why I can reach out to you and ask questions and feel like Jaden will know for sure.
Yeah,
So
I've definitely tried to stay connected this year. As I've told you both before, kind of after I graduated college and football was done for me, it was kind of like a not a safe haven, I guess, but like kind of just a quiet place to like go to the baseball games and sit there and not just and think about life and be social, and especially during the COVID times, like that was really all that was going on, was going to the Mariners games. So I just got really invested and I was like, okay, baseball actually isn't that bad of a sport. So I decided to get a little more interested into it, and it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun to watch.
and I grew up playing softball. I played fast pitch through high school. I tried out for WSU's softball team, but I injured myself during tryouts because I went too hard, which is fine.
Sounds accurate for what I know about you.
And WSU only had a club team because they didn't have like a D1 team. I assume there's like, Title IX issues with the number of sports and men's sports, women's sports scholarships and that sort of thing. But it gave me the one team I feel like I could root for softball was UW. Even though I was a Coug, I was like, you know what? They got their team and they're
That's
solid.
good to hear. I like that.
So it was the one team I was just like, I'll throw some support that way. So I grew my love for baseball, for softball and stuff because both of my parents, my dad coached baseball and my mom coached softball. And so growing up, watching the Mariners, seeing their successes, seeing their struggles, seeing them get to this point, the emotions that just like fill you up. And it's really like the happiness level for the team, for the organization, for the players, but then to see the fans that have stuck through it in their emotions. I'm such an empath, man. I could see one person crying, I'm a goner. Like it's
true. Yeah.
So it was just such a special moment. And I guess my question for you is any last thoughts? Like give us your hot take for the playoffs?
Hot take. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to lose that first game on Friday. First time being in the playoffs. Definitely nerves are going to be there. But I think they'll bounce back. Actually, I know they will on Saturday. And then it's going to be a really fun game on Sunday, I think. It's going to come down, since we seem to do this all the time, and we've had 12 walk-off wins this season. It's going to come down to something crazy like that, where someone makes a play in the field or we have a big at-bat. So that's what I think is going to happen with the first series, and then obviously we'll have to see from there. But Friday is the most important game, right? It's all about the next game that's in front of you. I will say, though, it is a bummer that we lost Haggerty. I don't think he'll be back for this first round.
No.
With the injury he had last night. And that's tough because when you get to this point in the season, like having speed and having utility players is like what you need. So, and he's really had a really, really good season.
Yeah. He was a huge impact player, and his speed is really like, honestly, in some of those moments in those games where it was tied and we needed somebody to steal the base and put themselves in a scoring position, that all it was
that swaggerty.
The swaggerty. Yeah.
Yep,
And he brought it. He 100% brought it. So he will 100% be missed, especially in this first series. He's not going to be he's not going to be available, and so prayers that he gets an opportunity to play some playoff games, because if they can win the series and have other opportunities in the playoffs, hopefully he'll be ready to come back.
Yeah, totally.
And
I think the big key for this team is obviously to continue with the success they've had in the bullpen and the fielding, because we've been top 3 fielding, top 2, I think, all season, which has been exceptional. And obviously we all know about the bullpen. And Toronto, they have some, as we've mentioned, they've got some guys that can hit the ball. So that's going to be important, especially on the road, being locked in on your assignments, being locked in on defense, locked in on the pitching. And if they can get on base early, from like innings 1 through 3, like we can actually get on base and get strikeouts early, I think it'll be a successful series. But
Who do you
if we
think
get up there, what's that?
Who do you think starting on Friday? Pitching.
I think Castillo will.
Castillo.
It'll be Castillo. And I think it will be Ray at 2. Some people on Twitter have had some thoughts as to should we play Ray? I'm not sure, but when you pay a guy like that and then get him in free agency and he's a veteran, you have to play him. It just wouldn't go over well if you didn't. So I can see that being Castillo, Ray, and then it's between Gilbert or Kirby. So both are great options, but I think they'll go with Gilbert.
You think that do you think that they would put Kirby in there for game 3?
I could see him maybe being like a reliever at some point throughout the series, but I just don't think that they're going to start the rookie over Logan like that. I think that would that'd be kind of crazy for Logan to kind of sit there and be like, why am I not starting? I've been here longer. So we'll see. Both have had really great seasons. Kirby's been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
His strikeout rate to batters walk has been insane, especially for a rookie. So it's a good situation to be in.
Yeah, it is a good situation to be in.
Yeah.
But you have to take it into account when you're in these positions. You have to put your best players out there in the best matchups possible. So taking all those things into account when you're making those calls and even creating the lineups that have to go against opposing pitchings, that all comes into play. So I'm really excited to watch the playoffs unfold. I know we're going to be texting each other like crazy over the next week. There's going to be a lot to be shared. So, Jaden, we just want to thank you for joining us tonight, for talking about the Seattle Mariners, this monumental moment.
Huge.
For, ending that playoff drought, 21 years. Mm-hmm. Here we are heading to the playoffs, and it's about to go down.
It's going to be fun. I can't wait.
Thanks for joining us, Jaden.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.